Don't you dare speak, you uneducated fool. All the credit goes to me, Gianna snapped. She had barged into my $20 million deal that I'd been working on. Gianna, an Ivy League graduate and my manager, always harassed me about my education. And now, she was trying to steal the credit for the $20 million deal I had worked so hard on. Furious, I decided to fight back. My name is Nyla. I'm a 40-year-old company employee. It may sound strange coming from me, but I've been good at studying since I was a child. Zechariah, my dad, wanted me to go to college, and I myself wanted to graduate from one. However, when I was in 7th grade, the company my dad worked for downsized, and our circumstances changed drastically. Dad found a new job quickly, but his salary was significantly lower, and Mom had to take on more part-time work. To make matters worse, we had just bought a new house. Our savings had run out, and the mortgage weighed heavily on us, putting our household finances in a tight spot. Eventually, we had to sell the house after just a year and move into a rundown place. In just 1 year, the value of the house had dropped, and even after selling it, my parents lamented that we still had a mortgage to pay off. After entering public high school, I also started working part-time to support our household, but Dad, stressed out, became addicted to gambling and started wasting money. Because of that, we couldn't save any money, and my college prospects became bleak. I'm truly sorry. Please go to work, Dad said, bowing his head, and I reluctantly decided to get a job. Even if I could have gone to college, I would have needed to take out student loans and work a considerable amount of part-time. Realizing that a very difficult college life was inevitable, I gave up. And so, I started working at my current company. Fortunately, I was blessed with good seniors and steadily built my career. Most of my colleagues were high school graduates, so I wasn't discriminated against for my education. Now, my achievements have been recognized, and I've been entrusted with a $20 million deal. It's rare for such a big job to come to a small company like ours. I'm determined to make it a success, but there's someone who's been getting in my way, causing me a big headache. That person is Gianna. Gianna is a 50-year-old manager who joined the company 3 years ago. She's a graduate of a prestigious state university and apparently worked as a manager at her previous job too. Hiram, the president, had high hopes for her impressive background and promoted her to manager right away. However, many employees, including myself, were skeptical of that decision. Our company often fails to get good results even when hiring highly educated people. According to an employee in HR, people who graduate from prestigious universities aim for top-tier companies. It's rare for talented individuals to come to an unknown small or medium-sized company like ours. The highly educated people who come to us are always the ones who failed the selection process at big companies. The truly talented ones get hired by famous companies. There may be some bias in this opinion, but I agree. In fact, the highly educated people who came to our company were all folks who had applied to big corporations but turned out to be completely useless. Moreover, many of them blamed the environment, saying that the big companies and the job hunting system were messed up. It's obvious they have personality problems. However, President Hiram is the type who values academic background, so he hires people quite easily just because they graduated from a prestigious state university. Hiram insists. From what I hear from other company presidents, university graduates seem to be more capable. From now on, we're going to focus on academic credentials. He won't listen to HR's opinion that we should look at their character. Gianna is also someone who got a job with us thanks to Hiram. At first, she was very polite and did her job properly. For once, we got a good hire, the HR staff said in surprise, and I felt ashamed for having prejudice. Gianna was amazingly successful, leading a major project and closing deals one after another just a year after joining the company. She was undoubtedly a major asset to the company, and Hiram was happy to have her as an indispensable part of the team. I've worked at various places and don't have a family. This company accepted me, so I'll keep doing my best. I was convinced things would continue to go well. But about a year and a half after she joined, Gianna's attitude gradually became more arrogant. She would spit out harsh words like, "You can't even do this? Why are you making such mistakes? Go back to elementary school," hurting her subordinates. Now she casually says things like, "The uneducated should just shut up and do as I say." As Gianna's direct supervisor, I'm no exception to her verbal abuse. "You're a high school graduate? I'm surprised you made it into society. I'd be too ashamed to even walk outside." She tells me almost every day, and my stress keeps building. At first, I wondered if something painful had happened to Gianna, but that doesn't seem to be the case. "I've been pretending to be a good person since I joined the company. I let you uneducated folks have it easy, so from now on, you'll do as I say," she arrogantly ordered me during work one day. It seems this self-centered attitude is her true nature. I had heard about her cruelty from people who worked with her at her previous job. She blames her own mistakes on others and slacks off at work. "It was really tough," said a male employee who had been Gianna's colleague, with a distant look in his eyes. Just as he said, Gianna constantly pushes responsibility onto others. The other day, she was late to a meeting because she got the time wrong, but she blamed her subordinates, saying, "It's your fault for not letting me know properly. Everyone's working overtime today." Furthermore, she claims that the fact that she's jumped from job to job is entirely the fault of those around her. "I mean, I'm just saying what I think, you know? And yet, everyone always ostracizes me," she says, as if she's the victim, but it's because Gianna's personality is warped that no one accepts her. I wished she would have just kept pretending to be a good person, even if it was a lie. "That character is too stressful, so I'm not doing it anymore. Erase it from your memory," Gianna said dismissively, "so I probably won't ever see it again." Anyway, there's no sign of Gianna's attitude improving, but that's not the only problem. Incredibly, Gianna has become a leader-like figure to the other highly educated employees and has started inciting them to rebel against the company. "You all are geniuses who worked hard at your studies. And yet, it's ridiculous that you're working at such a shabby company for such low pay. It's all the company's fault," she says. She treats the less educated so coldly, and then turns around and sweet-talks the highly educated like this. It's astonishing. Our highly educated employees tend to blame others for their own issues. Thanks to Gianna, that tendency has gotten even stronger, and they've started hurling abuse at other employees at every turn. "We're working for lower pay than others our age. Be grateful. The uneducated are in a position to support the highly educated. If we highly educated folks make a mistake, it's the uneducated's mistake too," they say, spouting such nonsense that it's truly sickening. What's more, they've even started standing up to Hiram recently. They claim that because they're highly educated, they should get a raise, but we're a small to medium-sized company. There's no way we can easily raise salaries, and even Hiram is struggling with this. "I have part-time job experience from college, so factor that into my evaluation too. I'm going on a month-long trip starting tomorrow, so pay for my travel expenses." He's at his wit's end with these unreasonable demands. Hiram seems to be realizing that his thinking was wrong and has even started talking about changing the hiring policy. I think that's a good thing, but the real problem is that Gianna's rampage won't stop. Lately, she's been putting her energy into stealing her subordinates' achievements, and her behavior has gotten even worse. This is work that was only possible because I, as your supervisor, supported you, right? It's no exaggeration to say it's my achievement, and if you go against me, who knows what will happen. Gianna is threatening her subordinates and forcibly creating her own accomplishments. Currently, she doesn't do any work and only engages in this sort of worthless behavior, so the frustration of the high school graduate employees is at its peak. And then one day, she targeted me too. That $20 million deal you're handling, I heard you're meeting with a client in a week. I'll sit in too and summarize the discussion for you. Huh? Wouldn't that be an inconvenience to them? Gianna was grinning, and it was clear she intended to steal the credit for my work. I wanted to stop her at all costs, but I already contacted the client, saying it's a really important discussion. They said it would be reassuring to have me there too, and that they were thinking of asking me to join from their side. Is that so? If that's what the client wants, I guess it can't be helped. Besides, no matter what I say, it'll be impossible to convince Gianna. For the time being, I backed down, but I didn't feel like having her join half-heartedly either. This is our company's most important business negotiation. Please thoroughly read through the materials beforehand and be well prepared. I copied the materials for Gianna's portion and handed them to her. Huh? Who do you think I am? I'll do it without you telling me something so obvious. Gianna seemed to be greatly offended at being given instructions by me, a high school graduate. Every day until the negotiation, she made snide remarks about it. And on the day of the negotiation, she looked down on me with a hateful smile, saying, "Don't you dare speak, you uneducated fool. All the credit goes to me." Even after going to the client's company and entering the designated meeting room, the verbal abuse didn't stop. It's presumptuous for an uneducated person to handle a $20 million deal. I'll do everything, so you just sit there like a piece of furniture. As she grumbled this sort of thing next to me, I finally got seriously angry. Understood. I just replied with that and actually stayed silent. In my heart, I was determined to strike back for sure. Then, the door immediately opened, and Frederick and Harding from the client company came in. Frederick is a slender, middle-aged man wearing glasses who works as a department manager. Harding is a well-built young man who, although inexperienced, is a capable person. When the two greeted us, Gianna also politely bowed her head. "Thank you for your time today. My name is Gianna." She even showed a friendly smile, which was unimaginable from her usual arrogant attitude. "Well then, let's get started with the business discussion right away." Gianna opened the materials and started her explanation. She spoke very smoothly, and there were no issues with her wording. Come to think of it, when Gianna first joined our company, she was a capable employee. Although she's become the worst employee due to her rotten nature, if she just uses her acting skills, she can give a good impression. Frederick and Harding weren't showing any particularly unpleasant expressions and were listening intently to the explanation. If nothing goes wrong, we should be able to seal the contract today, so I was thinking that maybe Gianna alone could somehow handle it when. Excuse me, but this part here, isn't it different from the previous explanation? Harding pointed to the materials. It was a part that had been revised during the stage when we were reviewing the contract details. Huh? Gianna hurriedly looked at the materials but started fidgeting, not knowing what to do. She had jumped into this job about a week ago, so she doesn't really know much about the past negotiations. I had summarized the important parts to Gianna, but Harding's question was about a very specific detail that I hadn't told her. I apologize. As for that, I'll have Nyla answer. Gianna turned to me with a smile, putting pressure on me. Even though she told me to be quiet, the moment she's in trouble, she tries to push it onto me. I let out a sigh internally, but decided not to speak as instructed. Oh my, what's wrong, Nyla? Please answer Harding's question. After saying that with a smile, Gianna angrily whispered. Answer the client's question, in a very small voice. Nyla isn't feeling well today and can't really speak. Gianna made up that lie, trying to somehow gloss over it, but Frederick and Harding weren't convinced. Just as I was thinking of speaking up, Harding started talking first. Isn't Nyla following Gianna's your instruction not to speak? Huh? Instruction? Gianna seemed flustered, not having expected that conversation to be overheard. I was also surprised by this unexpected development. I apologize for Gianna's inappropriate remarks. It's just as you say, Harding. When I immediately apologized, Harding made a face as if to say, I knew it. I arrived in front of the meeting room a bit earlier than Frederick. At that time, I heard a voice saying, Don't you dare speak, you uneducated fool. All the credit goes to me. I doubted my ears, but it seems I didn't mishear after all. Oh, that was just, a joke. Gianna averted her eyes and waved her hands meaninglessly. She probably wants to somehow smooth it over, but that's pointless. Sure enough, Frederick's eyes sharpened behind his glasses. Gianna, even as a joke, isn't that going too far? No, well, actually, I didn't make such a remark at all. Gianna told an obvious lie. Harding must have misheard. Or Nyla and Harding are conspiring to frame me. No, it's not my misunderstanding, and we're not conspiring either. I definitely heard you say, Don't you dare speak, you uneducated fool. All the credit goes to me. Gianna widened her eyes as if to say she was appalled. I also heard you say, It's presumptuous for an uneducated person to handle a $20 million deal. I'll do everything, so you just sit there like a piece of furniture. Harding's ears seem to be reliable, as he's reproducing exactly what Gianna said. Harding was apparently in the drama club in college and was good at memorizing lines. Even at work, he remembers instructions he's heard once very accurately. Frederick added insult to injury. With nowhere to run, Gianna put on an awkward, stiff smile. Oh, drama club. He looks more like he was in the judo club. Having a good memory is quite something. Stop laughing and hurry up and apologize. When Frederick told her off bluntly, Gianna made a startled face and bowed her head repeatedly. I'm very sorry. I got carried away. I had heard bad rumors about you for a while, but to think it was this bad. Upon hearing Frederick's words, Gianna made an unbelieving face. Huh? But I've never worked at your company. You've done business with our company, right? Remember, when you were at a different company. Even when Frederick said that, Gianna didn't seem to catch on. I certainly was employed there and had dealings with your company, but I didn't do anything rude. The worst was maybe being a bit loud at a drinking party. The problem was that drinking party. Frederick glared at Gianna. I heard you said all sorts of terrible things, like how high school graduates and below don't deserve to walk the streets. Huh? Did I say something like that? Gianna seemed confused and truly didn't remember. She probably just thoughtlessly said whatever she was thinking. I heard that when they demanded an apology the next day, you just made excuses and were very insincere. Because of that, you infuriated our rep and the contract was cancelled. It's true the contract was voided, but that's because they got angry for some incomprehensible reason. I did nothing wrong. Unbelievably, Gianna insisted she was in the right. That's exactly the problem. I only heard about it from my colleague, so I thought it might be a bit exaggerated, but it seems it's all true. Frederick's expression turned irritated. At this rate, the business deal itself might fall through. Gianna, apologize properly. I forcibly made Gianna lower her head. Gianna seemed to understand the situation had turned bad and apologized. I'm very sorry. I also apologized profusely, and they ultimately forgave us, but Gianna looked like her soul had left her body. In the end, as planned, I took the lead in the discussion. I've seen Nyla's sincere attitude thus far, so we'll go through with the contract. It will be a big plus for both your company and ours, and barring something major, we intended to seal the deal today. Frederick said, and the contract was safely secured. Our original goal was achieved, but Gianna's face was pale the whole way back to our company. And it seems this blunder was reported to Hiram by the client. When we returned to the office, Hiram was waiting for us in our department with a demonic expression, shouting, Gianna, what is the meaning of this? Given that the fate of a $20 million deal was at stake, Hiram's anger was tremendous. Starting with, you have to be mindful of your attitude with clients. He went on and on about everything she did wrong. Once that settled down, he then began reprimanding her about her daily work attitude. You've been stirring up the other highly educated employees and becoming the source of disturbances, haven't you? No, I'm just taking in the employees' grievances. Because Gianna made yet another ridiculous excuse, Hiram became even more furious. What do you mean, taking in grievances? Corporate discipline is falling apart. Seriously. Hiram's lecture part 2 continued with a relentless vigor after that. Thinking it's good for her to be thoroughly scolded for everything up until now, I deliberately left her alone. The other high school graduate employees weren't stopping it either, and were snickering. They're probably harboring similar feelings to me. However, there was no sign of the lecture ending at all, and even an hour after part 2 started, it was still going on. I had business with Hiram, so I wanted it to end soon. So I decided to smoothly step in between Hiram and Gianna. Hiram, let's wrap it up here. I also regret that I shouldn't have had Gianna sit in on the meeting. And as Gianna said, it wasn't good for me to stay silent either. Right. That's right. Following such a snide remark is childish. Gianna pointed straight at me with a grin, as if to say she'd found the culprit. Of course, Hiram immediately scolded her. Hey, you're not the one to talk. Well, I'm reflecting on it. So we're good now, right? Perhaps sensing the crisis of another lecture starting, Gianna tried to quickly slip away. But I had no intention of letting her escape and firmly grasped Gianna's arm. Wait a minute. Gianna, you've been harassing your subordinates in various ways. Take this chance to properly apologize for that too. Harassment? I've been appropriately guiding my subordinates though. Gianna made another excuse, looking off in some irrelevant direction. Fed up, I swiftly pulled out a voice recorder from my pocket. When I hit the play button, Gianna's voice came out. Why are you so incompetent? I'll have you kicked out of the company. The uneducated have no right to defy me. Such cruel verbal abuse poured out one after another, and Gianna began sweating profusely. This is, well, don't try to talk your way out of it. In what way is this guidance? When I took a firm step toward her, Gianna let out a pathetic eek. I'm sorry. I guess that was a bit too cruel. I'll be careful from now on. Gianna is at least uttering words of apology for now, but it's plain as day she's not reflecting. No, there is no from now on for you. I want to consult with Hiram about whether we can fire you. Fire me? There's no way that's happening. As Gianna held her head in her hands, the other high school graduate employees suddenly stood up. I think Nyla's opinion is valid. Gianna has been slacking off at work lately, hasn't she? I don't care if you're highly educated or whatever, stop looking down on people already. Seeing the employees exploding with pent-up frustration, Gianna was flustered. Everyone's aura of anger filled the entire room, making it an atmosphere where she couldn't possibly argue back. You don't have to get that angry. As Gianna slowly backed away, the door to the room slammed open and a young male employee entered. His name was Jace, and he was a highly educated employee like Gianna. His personality was similar to Gianna's, always complaining about society and the company. Perhaps because of that, he had a good relationship with Gianna and they would have lunched together during breaks. Jace, it's terrible. They say I'm going to be fired. Gianna clung to Jace, but he gave her a cold look. Oh, is that so? That's just as well, since you were annoying. Huh? Gianna was at a loss for words at his extremely cold response, but Jace ignored her and continued. I only hung out with you because you said things that were convenient for me, but you reek of nagging, and you're an old lady, so we don't click. You were annoying. Annoying old lady. Gianna was greatly shocked by Jace's merciless words. But I doted on you so much. I think Jace is being too blunt, but I guess this is the kind of person that gathers around Gianna. I think it'll be tough in various ways getting fired at your age, but well, good luck. Cold, colder than ice. Having lost an ally, Gianna broke down crying on the spot, but no one tried to comfort her. Then Hiram slowly opened his mouth. I wanted to make the company better, but it seems I had fallen into credentialism before I knew it. I must apologize to the employees too. From now on, I'll look more at people's character when hiring. Hearing that, Gianna wailed that she had lost her place, but I pulled her arm and made her stand up. This is no time to be crying. First, apologize to the employees you've inconvenienced. Yes. Startled by my thunderous shout, Gianna straightened her back. And she bowed deeply, saying, I'm very sorry for everything up until now. I will quit the company. You're too trapped by academic background. Because of that, you've lost sight of what's important. Learn to reflect properly and cultivate your heart. I understand. Her spirit broken, Gianna nodded meekly and burst into tears again. But still, no one tried to take her side, and Gianna continued to shed tears in loneliness. After that, it was officially decided that Gianna would be fired. On her last day at work, she awkwardly packed up her things and left with a back full of sorrow. I think Gianna had mentioned she had no family and nowhere to belong. I predicted that she would surely lead a lonely life from here on. I didn't know what became of Gianna after that, but one day I discovered her working part-time at a nearby beef bowl restaurant. She seemed surprised to see my face but obediently bowed her head, saying, Welcome to our restaurant. She had aged considerably and looked haggard, so she must have been under a lot of stress. She was being scolded by the younger store manager too, with zero energy. I imagined she would continue to lead a gloomy life like this. The other highly educated employees also lost momentum with Gianna gone. They stopped complaining to Hiram and the other employees. And with the strict gazes from those around them, they seemed to find it hard to stay at the company and quit one after another. Thanks to those people disappearing from the workplace, it became a much easier place to work. As for me, I still work at the same company even now. Because of the Gianna incident, A culture has formed in the workplace of not fighting over academic background. Until recently, there was a confrontational structure of low education versus high education, but in reality, no one wanted that kind of conflict. Also, I'm happy to say that my achievements so far have been recognized, and I was promoted to department manager all at once. From now on, I'll be in a position to watch over my subordinates. I want to do my best to maintain an environment where everyone can work comfortably. The Gianna case made me think a lot about academic background, but I keenly felt that extreme ideas are not good. No matter what your educational background, once you join the company, you're an employee of the same company. I want to work together and help each other without making unnecessary distinctions. With thoughts like that in mind, I'm working again today. I'll raise this child on my own, I told my husband, Kevin, with determination. But Kevin just laughed it off carelessly. Go ahead, do as you like. My daughter, Madison, is not an object. Yet, I felt nothing but disgust for Kevin, who treated her so lightly. Talking any further with Kevin would just be a waste of time. Well, I have to go to my beloved Aria. You two get along. Even if you both collapse, I'm a stranger now. Don't you dare rely on me, Kevin said and left the house. Later on. Is Madison here? Kevin returned, looking frantic. He must have found out about Madison's secret. How dare you show your face now? I looked at Kevin with disdain. Shut up. It's cowardly of you, too, to keep silent. Madison, let's live with your real family, with Dad. Were you bullied by Mia? Kevin spoke to Madison firmly. The next moment, Madison looked down on Kevin with disdain. Who are you? I am Mia. This year, I turned 45. I currently live with my husband of the same age, Kevin, and our daughter, Madison. Kevin was my classmate in middle school. Back then, the rowdy Kevin and the quiet me barely interacted. Kevin often skipped classes and was always sleeping if he was in the classroom. He seemed quite the troublemaker. However, Kevin had his good points. He valued friendship. Kevin got along well with everyone, regardless of gender. He seemed to care about his friends and was actively involved in helping them when they were in trouble. I watched Kevin from a distance. And without becoming particularly close to Kevin, I graduated from middle school. Kevin and I went to different high schools. We met again as working adults. One day, a reunion for our middle school class was organized. I am now in my 40s. I was curious to see what kind of adults everyone had become. There might be a chance to reminisce about the old days. Wanting to see my classmates and friends after a long time, I decided to attend the reunion. There, by chance, Kevin was seated next to me. Could it be Mia? Long time no see. Kevin spoke to me in a friendly manner. Back then, I was quite plain-looking, so I didn't stand out much. So, I was surprised that Kevin remembered me. However, I didn't mind it at all. You've changed, Kevin. I'm surprised. Kevin used to dress like a delinquent in middle school. But now, Kevin had short hair and was dressed refreshingly. There was hardly any trace of his old self. Then, Kevin and I hit it off, and we exchanged numbers when the reunion ended. After that, we started to meet regularly. Eventually, we began dating and started to think about marriage. Kevin felt the same way, and one day, he proposed. I want you to marry me. I couldn't imagine marrying anyone but Kevin, so I accepted his proposal. At that moment, Kevin was so happy, which made me smile too. We decided to just register our marriage, considering our age. We decided not to have a wedding ceremony nor honeymoon. After registering our marriage, Kevin revealed he had been divorced and had a daughter. I was surprised, but we were already legally married. There was no turning back now, and at this age, having my own children would be difficult. I decided to look at it positively, realizing I could experience parenting, something I had given up on. Fortunately, Madison was a good girl. Surely, the three of us will be able to get along well. That was what I believed. However, that was quickly betrayed. After getting married, Kevin soon reverted to the mischievousness he had in middle school. Maybe he had just been hiding it while we were dating. Soon after our marriage, Kevin and Madison moved into my house. I had bought a house worrying about my old age, while Kevin and Madison had been living in an apartment. Moving in with me would be more economical in terms of rent. So, I had Kevin and Madison move out of their apartment and into my house. Fortunately, there were several spare rooms. When I told Kevin there was no need for rent, he seemed happy and agreed to the move. For a while after Kevin and Madison moved in, life was peaceful. Kevin worked as a carpenter and often came home late. Since I worked from home and had a flexible schedule, I took care of Madison a lot. I was also in charge of dropping off and picking up Madison from the childcare center. Initially, Kevin was thankful for my help. I feel bad that I'm always so busy. Let's go out for dinner on Sunday as an apology. It's on me. Kevin would say that whenever he had to stay out late for work. But such considerate gestures began to change just 6 months after we started living together. I'm going out for drinks with colleagues tonight. Don't worry about dinner for me. Kevin would send such messages and then not return home until morning. We were still newlyweds. This seemed completely unreasonable. So, in the morning, I tried to confront Kevin. However, he immediately locked himself in his room upon returning home, making any discussion impossible. I have a hangover, so please leave me alone. I'm calling off work today. Kevin always does this when things get tough. He plays up feeling unwell, so I can't press the issue too hard. Understood. That was all I could reply. But my worries weren't just about Kevin. I was also concerned about Madison. Because Madison often fell ill, frequently coming down with fevers. She coughed a lot and frequently seemed to be in poor health. And I often received calls from the childcare center asking me to pick her up due to her condition. Having no prior experience with childcare, I had nothing to compare this to. But I was worried as this was happening too often. Concerned, I decided to talk to Kevin about Madison before he left for work one morning. It's about Madison. She's had a fever 5 times this month. Isn't that too much? It was clear she was getting sick too often. Then, Kevin frowned and said, "What am I supposed to do if you spring this on me all of a sudden? Isn't it somewhat inevitable with group settings like at the childcare center? But still." I let out a confused voice. Then, as if a thought struck him, Kevin said, "I think Madison is just not used to the new environment suddenly changing. Mia, you've become a mother now, so maybe try giving Madison more nutritious food, or be more attentive to her needs." Huh? I was dumbfounded by Kevin's reasoning. It was as if he was saying I wasn't feeding Madison properly. As I was lost for words, Kevin carelessly added, "Anyway, I'm busy. You'll have to figure it out, Mia." And with that, Kevin left for work. But Kevin is Madison's real dad. Doesn't Kevin worry about Madison? That thought crossed my mind for a moment, but right now, Madison was my main concern. I bought a cookbook and tried to prepare meals with higher nutritional value. But despite my efforts, something unexpected happened one day. That evening, as I was cooking dinner, I felt something was off because I couldn't hear Madison, who should have been in the living room. Usually, Madison would be watching TV and singing happily. Madison? What happened? I went to the living room to check on Madison and froze. Because Madison had collapsed. Her expression was full of pain. "Madison, are you okay?" I rushed to her and called out. But there was no response. So, I immediately called an ambulance. At the hospital, I learned something unexpected. Pediatric cancer? Yes. We'll need to discuss and decide on a treatment plan going forward. The doctor calmly explained the situation. Though I felt on the verge of panic, his composed demeanor helped me stay calm. It was decided that more detailed tests would be conducted tomorrow to determine the treatment plan. As specialists weren't available on Sunday. "Mom, can we go home today?" Madison, now conscious but waking up in a hospital, seemed anxious. "Yes, it's okay. Let's go home together," I answered Madison with a smile. It was Sunday, but Kevin wasn't at home. Because he had gone out drinking with friends. He had been looking up bars excitedly on his cell phone the day before. Kevin had left the house before noon and it was unclear if he would return today. I have to talk to Kevin properly. Madison's illness is serious, and it's necessary for Kevin to understand the gravity of the situation. However, Kevin recently hasn't been much involved in taking care of Madison. Honestly, I'm not even sure if there is any parental love for Madison. That's why I can't predict how he will react. I dread thinking about what's to come. I sighed to myself, alone with my thoughts. But that day, Kevin didn't come home. And he still hadn't returned by the next morning. Madison, let's go. With no other choice, I took Madison early in the morning to the hospital where she had been taken by ambulance the day before. We underwent various tests, including blood tests. We were told that the results would come later, so we returned home, somewhat exhausted. When we got home, Kevin was there, drunk. Welcome back. Moreover, Kevin was in a good mood, drinking a can of beer. I was angry at Kevin's attitude. It was insensitive given Madison's critical condition. I wished he would show more awareness as a father. Why didn't you come home yesterday? And what about work today? My voice lowered involuntarily. However, Kevin just laughed as if he was having a great time. Yesterday was so fun. I just got back a while ago and decided to take the day off, he said, taking another sip of his beer. I looked at Madison, making a gloomy face. Anyone would feel this way if their dad acted like this when they were dealing with a serious illness. I clenched my fists and yelled at Kevin. Enough is enough. Madison has pediatric cancer, you know? At a time like this, when things are going to be tough, do you even realize you're a dad? I glared at Kevin as I said that. Kevin looked shocked by my words. What? Madison has pediatric cancer for real? Then he turned to ask Madison. Madison nodded. His face turned pale. No way, this just got really complicated. I can't pay for hospital bills or anything like that. Kevin sighed heavily. I was appalled. The moment he learns his own daughter is sick, this is his response and attitude. He's completely failing as a father. Ignoring my dumbfounded silence, Kevin blurted out as if he had an epiphany. I hate dealing with troublesome stuff. Maybe it's time to call it quits. What? What do you mean? What does he mean by calling it quits? A question mark hovered in my mind. Then, in the next moment, Kevin made an unbelievable statement. Actually, there's someone else I like. So, using this as a chance, I'm thinking of remarrying. Madison's in the way, so Mia, you raise her. You've got some maternal feelings, right? What? Madison is sick, you know? Don't you want to support her as a dad? My anger intensified at Kevin's words. Madison, in a low voice, expressed her anger too. Dad's the worst. She murmured, visibly upset. It's unimaginable that these words are about his own daughter. Yet, Kevin didn't read the room at all. Well, if that's decided, let's get divorced. I even have the divorce papers ready. Saying that, Kevin pulled out divorce papers from his bag. He must have been thinking about remarrying someone else all along. Otherwise, there's no reason for him to have divorce papers prepared. Kevin, looking pleased, said, Of course, you'll have custody of Madison. I can't deal with a sick child. He said this with a laugh. Truly, he's finished as a father. Madison looked anxious at Kevin's words. Mom. She clung to me, her face pale. I realized when I looked at Madison. I couldn't leave her with Kevin, the absolute worst. Even if Madison wasn't my biological child, I loved her deeply. That's why I made my decision. I'll raise this child on my own, I told Kevin with determination. But Kevin just laughed it off carelessly. Go ahead, do as you like. Madison is not an object. Yet, I felt nothing but disgust for Kevin, who treated her so lightly. Talking any further with Kevin would just be a waste of time. Well, I have to go to my beloved Arya. You two get along. Even if you both collapse, I'm a stranger now. Don't you dare rely on me. Kevin said that and left Madison behind, walking out of the house. This is so frustrating. A tear rolled down my cheek. Kevin showed no awareness of his role as a father to the very end. Madison wouldn't have been rewarded with such a father. I looked at Madison. Then, Madison smiled sadly. I'm okay, so don't worry about me, Mom. I'm really sorry for causing so much trouble over this. She muttered hesitantly. It's no trouble at all. Kevin is truly the worst for making a 6-year-old say such a thing. My heart ached. So, I embraced her tightly and said quietly, "It's okay. Your dad will definitely regret this. I can't forgive him for abandoning such a lovely child." Madison trembled slightly. "Thank you, Mom." Tears overflowed from her eyes. Days later, Madison and I were living happily together. Fortunately, we were able to manage with outpatient treatment without the need for hospitalization. I couldn't forgive Kevin, but the time spent with Madison was healing. We took the opportunity to make sweets together and cherish our moments as a duo. Then, one day, "Is Madison here?" Kevin came back, looking frantic. He must have finally learned Madison's secret. "How dare you show your face now?" I glared at Kevin with contempt. "Shut up. It's cowardly of you, too, to keep silent. Madison, let's live with your real family, with Dad. Were you bullied by Mia?" Kevin looked at Madison, seemingly concerned. But that must have been just an act. After all his terrible actions, it's hard to believe he had a change of heart. The next moment, Madison looked at Kevin with disdain. "Who are you?" "What?" "Madison, what are you saying? I'm your only dad, right? Did Mia say something to you?" Kevin looked incredulous. Then Madison retorted, "My family is just Mom. I don't have a dad." She glared at Kevin. Rejected completely by Madison, Kevin looked at me desperately. "Mia, you haven't submitted the divorce papers yet, right? We're still married, and Madison is my child, right?" Kevin's eyes held a slight hope. I decided to confront Kevin with the reality. "I submitted the divorce papers long ago. What are you even talking about?" Kevin had left days ago. Then, Kevin's face turned desperate. "You act too fast, don't you?" he said, stunned. But in the next moment, Kevin turned to me. "Now that I know, I'm aware of Madison's insurance situation. You're just realizing that now," I muttered. Madison's secret. It was the substantial insurance policy taken out on her. Actually, my job is in life insurance sales. So, I understand the importance of life insurance better than anyone. I have a significant life insurance policy on myself, covering major illnesses, disabilities, care needs, and more. Of course, I'm also enrolled in pension plans and lump sum options. And the same goes for Madison. Soon after marrying Kevin and becoming a family with Madison, I enrolled her in several insurance policies where she was the insured. I had only told Kevin that I was taking out insurance on Madison. "You're covering the insurance premiums, right? Then do whatever you want." Kevin had said that. He seemed uninterested, and he never asked anything about it afterward. I think he had forgotten about it all this time. But I utilized all my knowledge to enroll Madison in the best possible insurance plans. Now, I know why he was suddenly so interested. I found it curious. So, I asked Kevin, "Why are you suddenly interested in Madison's insurance? You seemed completely uninterested when we talked about it. I thought you had forgotten." Then Kevin said something astonishing. "I was curious if there were any letters for me. I went to the house during the day and took a bunch, and I ended up taking some of yours too." From the conversation, it seemed Kevin had come to the house on his own and stole letters from the mailbox. "It was a letter from the life insurance company, so I got curious and opened it without permission. Then, I found out it was confirming the details of Madison's insurance." "You've taken out quite a lot on Madison, huh?" Kevin said, laughing. I couldn't believe Kevin had opened my letters without permission. I was so astonished, I couldn't even find the words to respond. Then, with a sarcastic smile, Kevin pressed on. "How much did you get from the insurance now that Madison has cancer? You did enroll in medical insurance, right? It should have been written in the letters." Kevin was eagerly inquiring. His greed for money was disappointing. Not once since he learned of Madison's illness did he show any concern for her. I didn't feel obliged to kindly inform such a person. So, I decided to feign ignorance. "Who knows? What are you going to do with that information now? We're divorced, so you can't get any insurance money, you know?" Kevin looked frustrated at my response. "That's because you're keeping silent. Why does he even think he's entitled to any money? I decided to confront him with reality. First of all, I'm the policyholder for Madison's insurance, okay? I'm the one paying the premiums. Why would you, who did nothing, think you have any rights? Then, uncomfortably, Kevin suggested, I'll remarry you. If we're married again, the insurance money becomes shared property between husband and wife, right? He seemed to realize he was at a disadvantage. I think that's natural too. Because Kevin hasn't contributed at all to the insurance premiums for Madison's policy. He must have concluded that even he couldn't claim any rights under those circumstances. I firmly stated, no thanks. Weren't you going to remarry Arya? I have no intention of remarrying at all. Who would remarry someone like him? I rejected him outright. Then, Kevin clung to me. I can't remarry anymore. The marriage with Arya is off. Kevin slumped, defeated, as he said this. What? What do you mean? You left the house so happily. I couldn't help but ask Kevin. Madison looked as surprised as I felt. Indeed, Kevin had said he was going to remarry Arya and left the house. Suddenly, the marriage was off. What has happened? Madison also seemed puzzled by the turn of events. Then, awkwardly, Kevin started to explain. Actually, after moving in with Arya, we spent all our time playing around, and I ended up getting fired from my job. Then Arya dumped me. I see. I was just astounded by Kevin. Turns out, Arya wanted to be a housewife. She said she didn't want a man without money and kicked me out of her house. Kevin was scratching his cheek, looking embarrassed. Even so, I had no intention of getting back together with Kevin. Just because Arya dumped you, you think you can come back? Anyway, I won't remarry you, Kevin. And you have no rights to Madison's insurance, just so you know. Don't say that, please. I'm begging you. Kevin was desperately pleading with me. But my stance remained unchanged. I've decided to live my life with just Madison. Why don't you start a new life, too? I responded coldly. Then Kevin let out a disgruntled sound. I was planning to take Madison's insurance money and go back to Arya. If I had the money, maybe we could get back together. Just give me the money already. So, that's your true intention? I was utterly disillusioned by Kevin's true intentions. That audacity of trying to get the insurance money that hasn't been paid just because he is Madison's biological father. I can't help but be truly disappointed. I grew even angrier. All you talk about is money. What were you planning to do with Madison in the first place? Did you even intend to take proper care of her? If he had plans to be by Madison's side through her hospital stays, there might be some redemption for him as a father. I waited for Kevin's answer. But Kevin was worse than I imagined. Huh? As if I'd bother with such troublesome stuff. Once I get the insurance money, I'd just leave her at some facility. If it's one attached to a hospital, they'd probably take her in, right? He said it as if it was the most natural thing in the world. You're the worst. I was speechless. Kevin seemed to have no awareness of being a father at all. He wasn't worried about Madison. Instead, all he saw was money. So, it's just about the money after all. And you call yourself a dad? I'm truly appalled. Besides, the insurance money has a designated beneficiary, so even if you got custody, it wouldn't matter. What? What do you mean? I sighed as I explained. Kevin seemed to think having custody would allow him to receive the insurance money. However, insurance policies usually have a designated beneficiary set at the time of the agreement. So, Kevin had no right to the money. Kevin was holding his head in his hands. Great! No job, no wife, no place to live. What am I supposed to do now? Kevin looked desperate. That's not my problem. Why don't you find a job? Somewhere I don't know. All of this was the result of Kevin's own actions. If he had been serious about his job, he wouldn't have been fired. It's entirely his responsibility. But Kevin seemed uninterested in working for himself. Cornered, Kevin seemed to have an idea. And then addressed me. Right. I'll stay and look after you too. It's risky for women to live alone, right? Besides, it might be reassuring for you to live with someone familiar. Kevin said this with hopeful eyes. Seeing my silence, he seemed to take it as affirmation. In return, just lend me some of the insurance money. Kevin said this with a wink. I was, in a way, impressed by his audacity to even suggest such a thing. Madison was looking at Kevin with a look of utter astonishment. Surely, Kevin must be the only father who could elicit such a reaction from his own daughter. It seemed clear that I had to be straightforward with Kevin for him to understand. I smiled brightly, hooking Kevin into a moment of shared joy. Then, suddenly, I raised my voice in a firm declaration. Absolutely not. I will take care of Madison by myself, so there's no way I'm considering getting back with someone like you. Don't you dare show your face to me ever again. But... Kevin's face fell in shock. Remember what you said, Kevin? Even if you both collapse, I'm a stranger now. Don't you dare rely on me. I'm throwing those words right back at you. Those words from him were unforgettable. It seemed Kevin gave up trying to persuade me after my declaration. Then, he turned to Madison with a whiny tone. Madison, you want to live with your real dad, right? You don't want this fake mom who's a stranger, do you? Kevin. Kevin was now attempting to cling to Madison, probably thinking if he could convince her, I would follow. His perpetual reliance on others was astounding. I looked at Madison. She was angrier than I had ever seen her. Until now, she has been at the mercy of his selfishness. Madison probably feels that anger. Taking a deep breath, Madison shouted, You're not my dad. I hate you. I only have Mom. Don't ever come back. With that, Madison hugged me tightly. Madison. I was moved by her words. Kevin, looking frustrated, finally conceded. Fine. Don't come crying to me with regrets. Kevin said this and started to leave. However, I called out to him one last time. Kevin. He turned back to respond. What? You're finally going to say you want to get back together with me? Kevin seems to think I agree. He looks confident. However, I was about to shatter his illusion completely. I smiled brightly and informed Kevin of my intentions. We have divorced, but I'll be claiming compensation for adultery. And that includes from Aria, too. You'll definitely regret neglecting Madison. Kevin's face turned pale. But I don't have any money. I don't even have a place to live or a job anymore. He muttered this. I smirked at Kevin's dismay. Such a shame, right? Thought you were going to get a big insurance payout, but instead, you find yourself having to pay. You're truly pitiful. Don't joke with me. Kevin shouted in frustration. If you show up in front of us again, I'll call the police. Be prepared for that. I said this with a bright smile. Perhaps intimidated by my smile. Yes, he replied and fled. After that incident, Kevin disappeared. I hired a lawyer to claim compensation from Kevin and Aria. Aria was initially reluctant to pay the compensation. However, she was persuaded by the lawyer and eventually agreed to pay the standard compensation amount. If you're not satisfied, we can always take it to court. It might become known to your company, though. I think my message through the lawyer had a significant impact. I heard that Aria broke up with Kevin and remained single. She had planned to live off a man, taking Kevin. However, in the end, all she was left with was the obligation to pay compensation. It must have been a regretful outcome for Aria as well. Kevin was in a worse situation than Aria. He lost his home and job. As a result, Kevin's financial situation dwindled. He must have been driven to the edge mentally, appearing in front of me and Madison from time to time. He looked disheveled and even smelled a bit. I worried he might do something drastic, which wouldn't be good for Madison's mental well-being. Therefore, I consulted with the police and got a restraining order issued. When Kevin was lying in wait for us once, a passing police patrol gave him a stern warning. I'm terribly sorry. Kevin fled the scene as if running away. After that incident, we didn't see Kevin again. He must be living in fear of the police by now. Interestingly, the compensation was paid by Kevin's parents. My in-laws apologized to me numerous times. Since Madison isn't biologically related to me and I've taken on her upbringing, they probably feel an extra sense of remorse. They've also been providing child support. And in return for paying these sums, Kevin's parents seem intent on severing their parental ties with him. Especially my father-in-law, John, furious, declared, "Kevin will never set foot in our house again. Even if there's an inheritance, he won't get a penny of it." My mother-in-law, Sophia, tearfully criticized Kevin. "It's truly shameful. Kevin is no longer my son." With that said, she showed a firm refusal. Given their stance, Kevin couldn't rely on his family home anymore. I've also informed his middle school classmates about Kevin's situation, effectively removing any potential support from his friends. Kevin always valued his friendships. He would often say during our time together, "I really treasure my friends from middle school. Those friendships are for life." He used to keep in touch with them frequently. Being cut off by his friends would be the hardest thing for Kevin. Most of his classmates are sensible, so it's unlikely any would stand by him now. Really serves him right. Now, Kevin is left with no one to rely on. Without a job nor supportive people around him, Kevin's future won't look bright. Since then, I've been taking Madison to the hospital regularly for her treatment. Fortunately, Madison's pediatric cancer was detected early, and the prognosis for a complete recovery is high. "Mom, I'm sorry." Madison always seems apologetic, but I love her, so it's not a problem at all. That's why I always respond with, "It's okay. We'll get through this together and get you well soon." The treatment has only just begun. There will be many challenges ahead. But as long as Madison and I are together, I'm sure we can overcome them. Every day, I strive to become the true mom Madison deserves. "You're the famous photographer. Are you shooting today?" The woman in front of me is staring at me excitedly. We met on the beach during clamming season, and she seems to know that I'm a photographer. Despite her family of 3 playing in the sand, she listens intently to what I have to say. It's a poignant reminder of my early days as a rookie, when people didn't believe I was a photographer and I barely got any assignments. When I tell her that I'm here for a photo shoot, she eagerly volunteers to be the subject. "But could you please not show my child's face?" She says this, pointing to a cute little girl. The girl, about 2 or 3 years old, looks at us with her big, adorable eyes wide open. "Of course." "And what about Dad?" When I ask, the father looks pale, glancing around uncertainly and giving vague replies. I guess that's understandable. After all, the dad building a sandcastle with the girl is my husband. My name is Katie. I'm a 30-year-old freelance photographer. For work, I'm often called to school events and weddings in the neighborhood. I capture moments of smiles and friendship, sharing them through my photos. It's not just about taking pictures, but about capturing people's memories and emotions, sharing their happiness. Capturing these joyous moments in people's lives is my job and my passion. But my life's shutter stopped in an instant due to a certain event. My husband, Galton, was a busy businessman. He was involved in the development of leisure facilities and tourist destinations, traveling all over the country. We couldn't spend much time together because of our busy schedules, but the time we did have was special. Even if it was just a little while, the time and smiles with him were what kept me going. I had no intention of quitting my photography. "We'll build our careers while supporting each other." We promised and got married. That's when I started looking for ways to work from home instead of being out and about for shoots. First, I posted landscape and permitted portraits on social media as part of my portfolio. By showcasing my work in virtual galleries like online photo exhibitions, not only publishers and peers in photography noticed me, but also a wider general audience. This led to a rapid increase in followers. Thanks to social media, I was able to do live streams, talking about my photography and even making some money from it. I would share my photos while explaining the stories and techniques behind them. Communicating through photography was fun and fulfilling. I balanced outdoor shooting with my social media presence, steadily growing my follower base. Galton was still constantly on business trips. Inevitably, I spent a lot of time with my in-laws, who thankfully took an interest in my social media activities. As I taught them how to use smartphones and social media, we grew closer, and they often tuned into my photos and live streams. Both are wonderful people, and even when Galton was away, I didn't feel lonely and enjoyed fulfilling days. However, there was a significant void in our lives. We couldn't have children. Despite numerous tests, we were unable to conceive. We both wanted kids, so years into our marriage without a child put a strain on us. Initially supportive, Galton grew tired of the financial burden and frequent clinic visits, and I could feel us drifting apart. His involvement in a major project, requiring constant travel, didn't help. His interest shifted from our elusive treatment to his challenging work. He cared less about our childlessness, talking more about work instead. I tried to understand his busyness, but we were emotionally distant. Yesterday, I had a meeting with a client, and it looks like a new project is starting. I'll be away overnight for a while starting next week. As he unpacked dirty shirts from his large suitcase, Galton told me this. He had just gotten back, but I quickly started the laundry. Galton wouldn't bother to clean or buy new shirts otherwise. It's faster and less risky this way, he would say, but I wanted to save where I could. So, about the hospital. That's impossible. You know I have to be there in person, right? I can't leave work, so let's skip it next week. I sighed quietly, so Galton wouldn't hear. I had made an appointment, but there was nothing I could do if he was traveling. Galton's actions caused trouble for his company, and it was painful to see the work he was once praised for being overshadowed by his personal life. I never wanted to be a hindrance. But, you know, as busy as I am, it's tough. Katie, you go out for shoots too, right? Let's both keep up the good work. Yeah. Take care of yourself, Galton. I swallowed my words as he casually dismissed the topic. Maybe Galton no longer wanted children. But I was too afraid to ask. Should I accept this silently, or should I bring it up, even indirectly? The uncertainty was unsettling. I was adept at capturing people's joy and sorrow through my camera. Yet now, I was living each day unaware of my own emotions. Slowly, I felt trapped within the frame of my own photographs. One day, a fine white envelope with the logo of a famous resort company arrived at the house. It didn't seem like just any direct mail, so I hastily opened it. Inside was a voucher for a stay at a luxury hotel by the sea. Apparently for 3 people. Why was this sent to me? Feeling a stir in my heart, I quickly went to Galton. Galton, this arrived. Do you know anything about it? Of course, I wasn't accusing him of anything. I was careful not to sound mean, just asking naturally. Galton stopped reading his newspaper and looked at me. His expression was blank, but his gaze hardened slightly, almost glaring. I had never been looked at that way before and couldn't hide the sinking feeling in my chest. That's for a colleague whose plans didn't work out, so it was sent to us. It's nothing strange, so can I have it back? He reached out his hand. Without saying a word, I handed him the envelope with the tickets, and he snatched it away. But when he saw the address, he looked back at me with clear annoyance. This is addressed to me. Don't open my stuff without asking. I was surprised and hurriedly apologized. However, it wasn't unusual for direct mail to come to my busy salesman husband. We usually disposed of the ones that arrived at home, so I was taken aback by his reaction. Sorry, I didn't realize it was direct mail. I was just checking. You should have asked me since I'm here today. Galton took the envelope to his room, and I couldn't ask any more about the tickets. Although I didn't fully understand why he needed to get tickets for a colleague, I had to accept his explanation. But then, half a month later, something else happened. In July, just before Independence Day, and when we had a memorial service planned at my in-laws, "I've got a long business trip," he suddenly said. I was initially speechless. A business trip? In my work, I often get requests from families or for landscape photography. But I had taken time off for the memorial service. Freelancers and even regular companies usually have Independence Day off. And so did Galton's company, at least in the past. Galton shrugged slightly and forced a smile. It just came up suddenly. I have to work without a break. So, can you attend the memorial service for me? I knew he took pride in his work and had been serious about his career even before our marriage. But increasingly, I found myself doubting the reasons for his work and trips. In the end, he left for work, pulling his favorite suitcase. The news reached my in-laws just in time, and while they were angry at his attitude, they made sure I didn't feel uncomfortable. "We're sorry you cleared your schedule for this. When I see Galton next, I'll give him a stern talking to," said my MIL, Helen. All I could do was give a vague smile. I was supposed to stay a few days after the service. Galton was their only child, and they didn't want me to leave too soon, so I ended up staying as originally planned. I brought my camera and took pictures of my in-laws doing housework, living their daily life, and even landscapes I don't usually focus on. I occupied my time with shooting plans, but part of me felt the absence of Galton, who should have been there. I decided to go to the beach one station away, both for work and a change of scenery. During the spring and summer holidays, the beach is lively with clam digging, and ideal family groups enjoy their time on the sands. Some people are under colorful beach umbrellas, enjoying walks and sunbathing. I walked along the beach with my camera. Suddenly, I stopped at the sound of a familiar voice, coming from a family building a sandcastle. I was glad I wasn't holding my camera. I would have dropped it at the sight. In the circle was Galton. He was with a young woman and a toddler, building a sandcastle together. They looked like a happy family, gathering white sand and shells. I couldn't believe my eyes. But the hotel voucher that had arrived at home, Galton's frequent long business trips, his indifference, it all piled up like sand before me. It would have been an ideal family scene for a photo assignment. But I couldn't believe my husband was there. The child between them looked about 2 or 3 years old. About the time I started feeling Galton drifting away. He had another family. Though I wasn't sure if the child was his, my instincts as a wife told me there was a blood connection. I felt as if a glass frame inside me had shattered mercilessly. The frame was supposed to hold our happy, smiling faces as a couple. I steeled myself and approached. Not Galton, but the woman. She was wearing a large straw hat and looked surprised when I suddenly spoke to her. I forced a smile and apologized for the abrupt approach. Then, I handed her my business card, explaining that I was a freelance photographer. The card only had my professional name, but it also included my social media contact. She looked at the card with interest, then started searching for me on her mobile phone. In the background, Galton, clearly aware of me, was frozen, staring at a spot on the beach. "Would you mind if I take a photo of your family? I sometimes do live streams showing photography tips." "What? I know Katie. I follow you. You post mobile photography tips, right?" She was excited, not knowing my relation to Galton, happy to be approached by a minor celebrity on social media. I was surprised she was a follower, but she was eager, even for a live stream. I hesitantly asked, and before I could finish, "Of course." She was already excitedly agreeing. I felt guilty, like I was deceiving her, but my goal was to document Galton's other family. Please teach me some photography tips for moms. Galton, you're okay with it, right? Galton was caught off guard. Stammering, he tried to avoid looking at me, desperately thinking of an excuse. We shouldn't, because of the face reveal. I'm a model for brochures, Can you just make sure my child isn't in the frame? It turned out the other woman, Lisa, was a model I had met through my husband's company's public relations work. Of course, I agreed and adjusted my phone camera to keep the child out of the shot. I quickly set up for a live stream, pretending to teach the mother, with Galton unavoidably in the center of the frame. His forced smile was interpreted positively by viewers, quickly spreading as cute nervous dad. After the stream, I thanked them and left. But within minutes, Galton caught up with me, leaving Lisa and the child behind. I asked him bluntly, "What are you trying to do?" He remained silent, looking annoyed. He probably felt awkward with Lisa and came to me as an escape. I wonder what his intentions were in stopping me. Finally, he spoke heavily. "Katie, understand me." What's there to understand without a proper explanation? It's clear enough if you look. Look, I couldn't help it. I had a child with her before I could with you. It's fine. Lisa's family is wealthy, she doesn't need me to marry her. Galton confessed, his defiance revealing the truth. It seemed unlikely that a young woman who got pregnant would say something so convenient. Probably, Lisa suspected he was married. I wanted a child. But you couldn't have one. Lisa is nice, and the kid is cute, like her. But it doesn't mean I hate you or don't want to live with you. His contradictory words left me holding my aching head. Apparently, he wanted to maintain the status quo. I won't bother you. This situation is perfect for me. Isn't this good enough? How could it be? I should have argued back. But I was so overwhelmed I lost my voice. In my silence, he sighed in victory and was about to leave. But someone unexpected arrived. It was my in-laws. Galton. Who are that woman and child? My Fael, Nathan, red-faced, confronted him. Galton flinched at their sudden appearance. Why? We saw the live stream notification. Who's the woman and child if you were on a business trip? Skipping a visit home for some unknown woman and a child. Without waiting for Nathan, Helen stepped in to defend me, showering Galton with fierce words. I was shocked. They had seen the live stream and realized something was wrong. They were stunned to see Galton as a husband with an unfamiliar woman and had rushed over. Confronted by his parents, Galton had to confess everything about Lisa and the child. Ungrateful child. He received a strong slap from Helen. Nathan glared at Galton with a look so fierce, I thought he might have punched him if Helen hadn't acted first. My in-laws left Galton behind and came to take me away. Following their apologies and strong encouragement, I decided to divorce. After uncovering evidence of Galton's affair with Lisa, his mistress, the matter was initially settled with a compensation agreement. However, as the divorce proceedings and investigations progressed, various facts came to light. Firstly, it was revealed that Lisa indeed knew Galton was married. Considering she agreed to continue the relationship despite being pregnant, it seemed she had prepared herself for being involved with a married man. Her motivation wasn't just financial, she likely wanted to keep Galton as long as possible. However, she genuinely didn't know that I was his wife and, upon realizing she was following me, blocked all my social media accounts. She angrily started posting on various forums, but this only resulted in more sympathy for me, as she publicly exposed herself as the mistress. It caused trouble in her own family, leading to her being nearly kicked out of her home. Desperately, she even tried to move into my former in-laws' house after I left. But they firmly refused her entry. Next, Galton's secrets began to unravel. During the compensation claim investigations, numerous women and men associated with him came to light. It turned out he had multiple affairs during his business trips, involving repeated liaisons with several women, some of whom were engaged or married. I decided to send out the data from that live stream. A little investigation would reveal that I, his lawful wife, was broadcasting, and the people in the frame were his mistress and their child. As a result, women deceived into thinking he was single, and husbands who felt their wives were stolen, were inflamed with anger and confronted Galton. He found himself facing lawsuits from every direction, with no choice but to accept them all. As more revelations about Galton emerged, Lisa, to everyone's surprise, fled with their child. Clearly out of love, she chose to escape her relationship with him. Lisa's social media uproar eventually settled down, and as her accounts disappeared, I decided to let her go. But considering her nature of boasting about affairs on social media, it was unlikely she would just vanish. True to form, Lisa started using an entirely different account. However, her posts playing the tragic heroine were quickly identified, attracting a wave of criticism. She would delete her account when things got tough, only to reappear under a new one, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Abandoned even by Lisa, Galton's last resort was to turn to his in-laws, but they were enraged upon learning of his multiple affairs. Without any apologies and simply pleading for help, his parents decided to sever ties with their son. Following the scandal, Galton was burdened with substantial compensation payments. As the legal proceedings progressed, inquiries from his mistresses and their husbands flooded his company, complicating the situation even further. Moreover, this wasn't the worst outcome. The unprecedented scandal of his affair and child being exposed on social media was disastrous. The fact that the reveal happened during a business trip made the information spread rapidly, and the company's facilities and reviews were flooded with shocked and angry comments. The fallout from the scandal spread internally and externally, diminishing the company's trust. The executives, feeling a crisis, hastily strategized communication plans, consulting with experts due to their lack of experience in handling such situations. Meanwhile, they strictly instructed employees to provide accurate information to quell the chaos. Inquiries and condemnations from inside and outside the company poured in, and Galton's reputation plummeted. He became an outcast at work, completely isolated. Amidst the uncomfortable atmosphere, he was soon asked to resign and had to look for a new job. Originally proficient and successful in sales, he was favored by an older demographic who didn't use social media and quickly found new employment. However, his nature didn't change. Within half a year, he was involved in new scandals, such as pursuing his manager's wife and attempting to charge a shabby motel stay as a business expense. He was fired, joined new companies, and was repeatedly dismissed for causing turmoil in personal relationships. Now, he seems to be perpetually bouncing from job to job within the industry. Meanwhile, I've maintained a relationship with my former in-laws after the divorce. They've been considerate, allowing me to live peacefully. Their support was crucial for me to move on and start anew after ending my relationship with Galton. Following the divorce, I struggled with photographing children, finding it painful. My in-laws, despite being betrayed by their son, strived to present a united front, supporting me. They helped me believe that my relationship with Galton wasn't everything and that I could trust again. One day, I captured a photo of them talking peacefully. I plan to feature this photo in my upcoming online exhibition as the main piece. Although they were quite shy about it, I believe they'll be happy with it in the end. Look, that's my friend's dad. This happened when I attended my beloved niece Gloria's parents' day. I was shocked to see a couple walking into the classroom. Because the man, cozying up to a woman I didn't recognize, was my own husband, Mike. After talking to Gloria, everything clicked for me. So, that's what it was all about. I'll never forgive this. As Mike was about to leave the classroom, I blocked his way, putting on a smile. Let's continue to get along as families, shall we? Please, stay with us until the end to see the turmoil that unfolds from here. My name is Emily, I'm 33 years old, and we're a dual-income couple in our 5th year of marriage. My husband's name is Mike. We met in a sort of half-set-up situation. My parents, who I met later in life, became good friends with Mike's parents, and we first met at a family dinner we were all invited to. Mike made the first move, and that's how our dating began. After a year and a half of dating, when we decided to marry, both sets of parents were thrilled. Everyone around us congratulated us, saying we were a perfect match. At that time, my close sister Flora also attended from afar, bringing along her then 1-year-old daughter Gloria, and I remember feeling so happy. 5 years later, I was still living with Mike, busy with work. Mike would say he's busy with work, coming home late on weekdays, and increasingly, his precious weekends were spent working. With Mike off and away, I found myself spending more time alone. I wish we had kids. That thought crossed my mind, and I shook it off. Actually, not long after we got married, Mike dropped a bombshell on me. I, actually, can't have children. The hospital test results he showed me clearly stated that. Since when did you know? I knew before we got married. But I thought if I told you, you might not marry me. Please, Emily, I don't want our parents to know about this. Keep it a secret. Mike had always said he loved kids and wanted a daughter someday. Knowing that, I felt deeply sorry for him at that moment. We'll take care of each other instead of having kids. Let's live our lives together. With those words from Mike, I nodded and resigned myself to giving up on the idea of having children. Now, 5 years later, did Mike keep his word? No, he didn't. Saying he's busy and tired, leaving all the household chores to me despite being a dual-income couple, without ever showing appreciation, his attitude towards me turned increasingly cold. One day, I got a call from Flora. She had moved abroad with her husband right after our wedding, but now that his assignment was over, they were moving back, not too far from us. Gloria was now 6 years old. I had seen her in photos, but this would be our first real interaction since the wedding. I was looking forward to meeting Flora and Gloria again. That night, I tried to tell Mike, who came home late, about Flora's return. Welcome back, Mike. You know, I got a call from Flora today. I'm tired. I don't have time for small talk. Mike looked down at me coldly and quickly went to the bathroom. Left alone, I stood there, feeling lonely. Despite his aloof attitude towards me, Mike left all the troublesome matters for me to handle. Hey! We're going to have a birthday party for Mom. Dad asked me to prepare, so you take care of it. I was left puzzled when he unilaterally said that, but I went ahead and prepared for my mother-in-law, Helen's birthday party, squeezing it into my busy schedule. On the day of the birthday party, Mike, who attended, wore a proud smile as he saw Helen's joy. This birthday party, I set it all up. All for my dear Mom. Dad, I did good, right? Despite the fact that he had dumped everything on me, Mike had the audacity to claim the credit, which irked me a bit. However, after the birthday party was over, my father-in-law Nicholas and Helen thanked me. We know it was Emily who prepared everything. Thanks for doing this for Helen. Please continue to take good care of Mike. They were as kind to me as they had been since the day we got married. Despite my growing grievances with Mike, I was grateful for having met Nicholas and Helen. Sometime later, Mike's arrogant behavior only escalated. He wouldn't have a proper conversation with me, yet he always found something to complain about regarding the housework. One morning, an incident occurred.
Hey, Emily! What were you thinking?
Mike yelled at me, his face contorted with anger as I was getting ready to leave for work. What's wrong with you all of a sudden?
You didn't polish my shoes. How am I supposed to go to work like this?
Indeed, Mike had come home after I had gone to bed the previous night, so I hadn't polished his shoes. But, fed up with the mounting stress, I retorted.
They're your shoes. Why don't you take care of them yourself? Stop expecting me to do everything.
In the next moment, I felt a sharp pain on my cheek. It took a second to realize Mike had slapped me.
Mike, did you just hit me? Shut up. There's nothing wrong with disciplining my wife. If you don't want this to happen, do your job as a wife properly.
With that, Mike stormed out of the house. I was left clutching my cheek, collapsing onto the floor.
He's hardly home, acts cold, and now violence. This is too much.
That's when I began to question the meaning of my marriage to Mike. Yet, considering how happy our parents were when we married, and how kind Nicholas and Helen have been to me, I couldn't easily decide to divorce. One day, not long after she had returned from abroad, Flora asked, "Would you come to my daughter's Parents' Day?" Only 2 family members could attend, and Flora's husband couldn't make it because of work. I happily agreed, saying,
"I'll be there."
On the day of the Parents' Day, I went with Flora to Gloria's classroom. We waved back at Gloria, who was happily waving at us. Soon, the lesson started, and I watched from the back corner of the classroom. Then, a couple entered the classroom late. I was shocked when I glanced at them, because the dad was unmistakably Mike. He was there with a blonde woman, dressed flamboyantly, whispering and looking cozy as they started watching the class. I told Flora, and both of us, surprised, tried to stay out of sight from Mike for the time being. At that moment, I discreetly sent a message to someone. As the Parents' Day came to a close, the children started making their way over to their parents. Gloria ran over to Flora, and I bent down to ask her, "Do you know that man over there?"
That's Irene's dad. I saw his picture at their house when we went over to play.
Gloria had been abroad for so long that she didn't remember Mike's face since the wedding when she was 1. At that moment, I understood everything. So that's what it was. I will never forgive this. As Mike, the woman, and a child named Irene were about to leave the classroom, I blocked their path, forcing a smile in front of the child.
Hello. I hear Gloria has been getting along well with you. Thank you for that.
Mike looked at me, his face freezing over. The woman casually replied, "Hello.
Since the kids get along so well, let's all continue to be friendly, shall we? Family style."
Huh. Beside the puzzled woman, Mike started to tremble. Then Flora said, "Since the 2 want to play together, we'll take Irene with us." And quickly whispered something to me as she was leaving. As Flora and the children walked away, it left me, Mike, and the woman. "Come on, Mike, let's go," Johanna said. Yes, excuse us," Mike responded, trying to act like a stranger. I grabbed Mike's arm with a smile, still.
Huh? What are you doing with my husband? And who are you?
I then introduced myself with a serious face. Sorry for the late introduction. I'm Emily. His wife, you know? The woman's face turned pale as she realized the situation. They tried to dash away. But having been in track and field during my school days, I easily caught up and stopped them. At the school gate, Mike gasped.
What? Dad, Mom too?
Yes, the person I emailed during Parents' Day was Nicholas. I had sent him a message asking him to come quickly to Gloria's school. Seeing Nicholas and Helen, Mike gave up trying to escape and collapsed. Nicholas, Helen, and I put Mike and the woman in the car and headed to the in-laws' house. In the living room of the in-laws' house, with the 2 seated side by side, I confronted them. So, why were you at Parents' Day?
It was nothing. She's just an acquaintance. A single mother who asked me to act as a father figure, nothing more. But Gloria mentioned there are family photos of you at her house. Do you usually take family photos with just acquaintances? You don't need to lie so blatantly. Mike, resigning himself, began to explain. The woman's name was Johanna. He had been involved with her before we met. Johanna worked at a night bar, and thinking Nicholas and Helen wouldn't approve, he kept it hidden. After introducing me to his parents, he broke off the relationship with Johanna. But right after we got engaged, Johanna contacted him saying, "I gave birth to your child." After seeing Irene, I couldn't help but go back to Johanna. I found her so adorable. That's when I asked something that had been bothering me. You can't have children, right? That medical report was real, wasn't it? That's because... Mike began to reveal something shocking. Right before our marriage, Johanna had told him, "Don't have children with anyone but this child." And so, Mike had gone through with a vasectomy. For such a selfish reason, you made me give up on having children. Do you understand how I felt? Johanna laughed at my angry reproach. Shut up, loser. Mike loves me. You are just a pity marriage. When I asked, "Is that true, Mike?" He nodded. I married Mike because Nicholas and Helen liked me, and our parents got along well. I was efficient, took care of the house and personal matters perfectly. So he only ever saw me as a maid. So, a maid, huh? But now that it's out, there's no helping it. I'll divorce you. I have a woman I love and a lovely daughter. You're no longer needed. That's when Nicholas, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Did you forget why Emily's parents and we got along so well? Huh? The truth was, both our parents owned businesses and were in a cooperative relationship. Currently, Nicholas's company's most important client was the company where I now serve as a department head, owned by my parents. You might not know since you were sent to work at a friend's company for training, but if we lose the business with Emily's company, we won't survive. It was then revealed that Nicholas had always told Mike, "You'll take over someday, so keep up with the company's affairs." But Mike, not taking it seriously, was unaware that my parents' company was the most crucial client. So, I intended to leave the company to you, but now there may not be a company to inherit. More importantly, we're disowning you. I never want to see the face of such a foolish son again. As Nicholas declared disownment, Mike started to panic, begging Nicholas and Helen. But Nicholas and Helen firmly refused him. At that moment, I received an email on my mobile phone. Checking it, I smirked. So, Johanna. How's Irene's real dad doing? Huh? I confronted them with a photo of Johanna, heavily pregnant and looking cozy in a childbirth class with a brown-haired man unknown to me. You seemed quite close to this man during your pregnancy. Where did he go? How do you have that? I explained that when Flora took the children away, I had asked her to gather any information she could on this woman. Flora, using her network of mom friends, managed to get this photo. According to her mom friend, this man used to accompany her to every prenatal checkup. I thought he was the new husband Mike knew about. Hearing this, Johanna's face grew paler and paler. Mike was visibly shaken by the photo. No wonder, since the man in the picture and Irene looked remarkably alike. Hey, Johanna! What's going on? This man looks exactly like Irene. When I pressed her to tell the truth, Johanna seemed to resign herself and began to speak. She admitted to two-timing while with Mike, and said that she got pregnant right after they broke up, but after the child was born, they had a big fight, and he left. She thought it would be best to claim the child was Mike's, the prospective company president's, to monopolize Nicholas's inheritance, so she convinced Mike to have a vasectomy. You're kidding! I believed in you and became incapable of having kids. Mike shook Johanna's shoulders in disbelief, but she just turned pale and said nothing.
Then Mike approached me.
I'm sorry, Emily. I was deceived by this woman. You said you'd stay with me even if we couldn't have kids. Let's start over. I only love you.
Huh? Didn't you just say I was no longer needed? Who's the maid? Mike was at a loss for words, so I declared.
We're getting a divorce. And I'll be suing both of you for adultery, so be prepared.
As Mike broke down crying, I told him.
Never show your face to me again.
I left Mike and Johanna to their ugly argument and walked away. Eventually, my divorce from Mike was finalized. I received $40,000 in alimony from Mike and $20,000 from Johanna. Nicholas and Helen, having disowned Mike and deeply apologized, persuaded my parents to continue the business dealings. They informed the president of the company Mike was supposed to inherit that they were leaving Mike's fate in their hands. Consequently, Mike, who had never been serious at work, was fired. Johanna moved away with her child and returned to night work, likely struggling with debts incurred from paying me alimony. After separating from Johanna and depleting his savings, jobless Mike lived alone in a showerless apartment, desperately job hunting. As for me, 3 years after leaving Mike, I remarried a sincere man I met through work, who treats me kindly, and we were blessed with the child I had always wished for. We're now looking forward to meeting our baby, enjoying each day happily. Can you lend me some money to go to the hospital? In the middle of the night, 8-year-old Owen came to our house. Moreover, he was limping in pain. It's over an hour's walk for an adult to our place. What on earth happened? Looking closer, various parts of his body were scraped, and he was bleeding. Exhausted and in pain, Owen's eyes were vacant, as if he might collapse at any moment.
Absolutely not!
My husband shouted at the innocent child. He was very angry and went somewhere. And then, I was shaken to my core by my husband's unexpected action. I am Kate, 60 years old. I lived with my husband, Raymond. Our son and his wife lived in the next town, about an hour's walk from our house, making a car essential for travel. Phil's wife, Linda, is 6 years younger than him, and they have an 8-year-old grandson, Owen. Until now, Phil often brought Owen to our house, so I had been taking care of Owen since he was a baby. On the other hand, Linda rarely came over and had told Phil, "Bring him here." However, it seems Linda has been devoted to housework and childcare, wanting to make some free time for her from now on. Moreover, Phil said, Linda is very domestic and takes good care of us, satisfied with their current family situation. There's no way to intervene, even as a mom. I told myself, letting them do as they wished. But I had no idea such a tragedy would strike us later. It was when Phil was promoted and decided to work abroad half a year ago. Phil, who hates being away from his family, wanted to leave Japan with his family. However, Linda objected. I told myself, letting them do as they wished. But I had no idea such a tragedy would strike us later. It was when Phil was promoted and decided to work abroad half a year ago. Phil, who hates being away from his family, wanted to leave Japan with his family. However, Linda objected.
Owen has just started elementary school and has friends. It's cruel to make him transfer.
Of course, Phil tried to persuade her. But Linda insisted, and with a heavy heart, he left for abroad alone. And sadly, at the same time, Owen stopped coming to our house. I have repeatedly asked Linda to let Owen visit, but each time she made up excuses to refuse. Still not giving up, I pleaded over the phone just to see him for a moment. Then Linda, raising her voice, ranted at me.
It's hard enough without Phil. I can't stand having to worry about you too. Are you trying to monitor me?
No, that's not it at all. Just a short time at the doorstep, I just want to see Owen's face.
Don't you understand I don't want that? If you keep pestering me, I'll tell Phil and have him scold you.
After saying that, Linda abruptly hung up. Sigh, it seems like nothing will help. Maybe that's just how a son's wife is. Phil had emailed me that his new job was demanding, cutting into his sleep time. Not wanting to cause Phil any more worry, I decided to wait to see Owen until Phil returned home. And before I knew it, more than half a year had passed since I last saw Owen. Raymond and I, missing seeing Owen's face, looked at his photos every day to distract ourselves. Raymond's favorite was a group photo from Owen's entrance ceremony. According to Raymond, Owen's anxious face was adorable. One evening, just as the clock struck 9 p.m., the sound of the house doorbell rang suddenly, so I opened the front door. "Can you lend me some money to go to the hospital?" What a surprise, 8-year-old Owen had come.
What happened to you?
"My leg hurts, and I can't sleep at night, so I decided to go to the hospital myself. But this is all I have." When Owen slowly opened his palm, there were 3 dimes. Apparently, he had walked here, dragging his leg in pain, for over an hour. "I fell on the way," said Owen, whose knees were scraped and bleeding. But no matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't understand. I decided to slowly listen to his story and invited Owen into the house for now. Then, at that moment, Raymond, who had been silent until then, suddenly spoke up.
Absolutely not. What are you saying? Are you out of your mind? Owen is in so much trouble.
Angry at Raymond's cold attitude, I grabbed his sweater with both hands and shook him. However, Raymond pulled my hands away with great force and, with a face like a demon, left the house without saying anything. "It's because I came. I'm sorry. I'll go home now." Owen, completely shrunken, turned his back on me and reached for the doorknob. "Owen, don't worry about Grandpa. I'll take you to the hospital myself, so no need to worry." I immediately called an ambulance and at the same time, I called Linda. But I couldn't get through to her, and my texts weren't even read. 20 minutes later, while all this was happening, the paramedics finally arrived. Owen was taken to a nearby hospital, and I accompanied him. Afterwards, Owen was diagnosed with a fracture by the doctor. He was treated and instructed to rest at home. What is Linda doing at a time like this? Even at this point, I couldn't get in touch with Linda, so I decided to take Owen back to our house. "Would you like something warm to drink? You used to like tea with honey, didn't you? I'll prepare it now, so please sit in that chair and wait." As soon as we arrived home, I filled the kettle with water and turned on the stove. Then, Owen suddenly came close to me. "Oh dear, you should be sitting still." "It's not that, Grandma. You see." At this moment, I was told an astonishing truth by Owen. Owen, having confessed everything, had big tears in his eyes. "So that's what happened. It must have been hard for you. But you can rest easy now." I hugged him gently, as if wrapping him in warmth. And then, I was informed of a certain event by an unexpected person.
Those who made Owen go through this will not get away with it.
A flame of revenge ignited within me. The next day at noon. Finally, Linda answered the phone. "Owen has fractured his leg and was seen at the hospital. Now, he's at our place. Apparently, resting at home and eating nutritious food will help him heal faster." Then, "Kate, please continue to take care of Owen for a while. You must be happy to be able to look after Owen so much since you haven't been able to see him until now, right?" I just said, "Understood," and hung up. I had no intention of sending Owen back to that house. Even if Linda had said, "I'm coming to pick up the child now," I planned to keep Owen with me by any means, so Linda's response was exactly what I wanted. However, I felt anger at her attitude as a mother. But I didn't want to get unnecessarily confrontational and spoil the plan. In the meantime, as I supported Owen, I ran around preparing for retaliation, and finally, everything was ready. "All right, watch out. Today, right here, I'll bring you down." A week after Owen came to stay with us, I left him at home to look after himself for a bit while I, accompanied by someone, made a surprise visit to Linda's place.
What is this about? Showing up out of the blue. Please, just go home.
I had gotten a key to their house from Owen. Ignoring Linda's protests, I began to look around the room.
Was someone here just before we arrived?
I noticed that, although the room was generally tidy, the sheets on the bed in the bedroom were unusually disheveled.
Enough of this. I'll call the police if I have to.
Oh, Linda, you really think you're in any position to say that?
I've heard everything from Owen. Leaving him all alone while you're out at night, I see.
He was told not to tell anyone. What Owen had tearfully told me before was about this very issue. According to him, one day, feeling lonely and scared because he was sick, he tried to stop Linda from going out at night by standing in the doorway with his arms outstretched.
But you just pushed him aside and left anyway. He hurt his ankle when he fell.
Linda always told Owen.
Don't you dare tell Dad or anyone about what happens at home, or you'll go without food.
But that day, unable to bear the pain any longer, Owen thought, maybe Grandpa and Grandma can help somehow. So, relying on his memory, he limped all the way to our house.
If you have money for luxury brands, you should at least take Owen to the hospital.
When I opened the closet, it was packed with obviously expensive bags and clothes. Owen had confided in me.
Mom always has nice clothes and bags, but she doesn't care about me.
It was clear Linda's possessions were all high-end and flashy.
The loneliness without Phil, you're trying to fill it with shopping. That's also on your son, you know.
Linda, veins throbbing with anger, pointed her finger at me. Then, suddenly, a low voice boomed from behind me.
Shut up! I've seen the affair with my own eyes.
The voice belonged unmistakably to Raymond. He had stormed Linda's home with me. That day Owen came to us seeking help.
Not lending it!
Raymond had shouted before storming off, leaving me initially infuriated. However, his anger was actually directed at Linda. Overwhelmed by fury, he had blurted out without thinking. Raymond had headed straight for Linda's house after leaving ours.
I saw you getting into a car driven by a man at that very moment. And I knew he was Owen's first-grade teacher.
Raymond had memorized the face of the teacher who had been in charge of Owen's class from looking at the school photo every day. After Owen revealed the truth to us, we were informed about Linda's secret rendezvous with Owen's former teacher.
I heard from the affair partner that you always dressed provocatively for parent-teacher meetings and aggressively flirted with him.
I confronted the former teacher based on Raymond's testimony. The affair partner admitted that despite knowing it was wrong, he gave in to Linda's temptations when Owen moved to a different class. The former teacher expressed remorse and readily agreed to pay the compensation. He had already submitted his resignation and promised never to see Linda again, planning to return to his hometown.
You stayed in Japan because you couldn't bear to part with him under the guise of for the child's sake, didn't you? Well, that's...
Linda faltered, caught off guard. I assumed that she hadn't taken Owen to the hospital after pushing him because she feared being discovered. And perhaps she thought Phil would cut her allowance if he found out, which is why she didn't take Owen to the hospital. Then, likely because I had accurately pinpointed the truth. Linda couldn't hide her agitation. However, after a brief pause, she defiantly claimed,
If I beg Phil, he'll surely forgive me.
Haha, he really loves me.
Linda, enough is enough. Phil, when did you get back?
Phil, having been informed by me, had hurried back to verify the truth with his own eyes. Believing Linda wouldn't show her true self in his presence, he secretly observed everything from the shadows.
I've heard it all. I can't forgive you. Your behavior towards Dad and Mom is too appalling. I want a divorce. Wait a minute. It was just a lapse in judgment. Plus, Owen is only 8. He needs his mom. I just visited Owen at the hospital, and he's made it clear he doesn't need a mom like you.
Even after receiving such a decisive blow from Phil, Linda desperately begged for reconciliation. But Phil steadfastly refused. Linda then turned to me with a fierce look, baring her teeth.
You've made him leave me because of your meddling. How do you plan to take responsibility for this? That's on you. Besides, I heard you've always seen Phil as nothing but an ATM.
I had been sniffing around Linda, checking if she had any secrets by going through the wedding guest list and making calls.
And I'll be sure to inform your parents about all of this, so be prepared. Stop! My dad hates dishonesty. If he finds out about this, I'll be disowned. Then who will take care of me?
You're an adult.
Why not work for yourself? No way! I've been living a comfortable housewife life on Phil's salary. I don't want to work now. It's too humiliating.
Faced with Linda's selfishness, both Raymond and Phil were dumbfounded, speechless.
You'd better experience some hardship and reflect on your actions.
Can't you do something? I'm sorry. I really am remorseful. You're the only one I can turn to now. Finally, Linda begged for forgiveness through her tears. However, I simply looked at her coldly, without giving any response. Perhaps thinking she had no other options left. She started to cry out.
I'm so sorry. Please help me.
Right there and then.
You know, Owen sought your help many times too. But you ignored all his pleas. Thinking only of yourself is really convenient, isn't it?
Hearing my words, Linda broke down crying, but I was unmoved and threw her out of the house. After that, Phil and Linda's divorce was finalized, and Linda was ordered to pay $30,000 in alimony. We also claimed $10,000 from her affair partner, the former teacher. But Linda, having drained her savings, got a job at a night bar only to be fired soon after due to her selfish nature. Currently, she's juggling jobs in road construction and cleaning. Phil still has to work abroad, but has promised to return home whenever possible to see Owen. Until Phil returns, we, as a couple, have taken it upon ourselves to care for Owen. Filling the gap of the time we couldn't see him, watching Owen grow has brought true happiness to Raymond and me. Suddenly, my parents appeared and started knocking on the car window.
Dad, did someone ask you for something?
Well, what could that be?
You're always so stubborn. Just go and convince your husband, James. Say the chairman should be William because it's better for the company and step down. Or else.
So, they've teamed up with my in-laws to knock James off the chairman's seat. And then I noticed, in Mom's hand was something like a crowbar. She swung it high and crash, the window shattered. I was stunned for a while when I heard that a suicide note was found in James's car, who had fallen off a cliff. Then, a week after the car was found, an envelope arrived with a specific delivery date. James? I hurriedly received the envelope and opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter. And a key.
Read this without our parents finding out.
Of course, I knew that. But he probably wanted to write it that way.
This is something I wrote in advance, in case something happened. If I'm there when you receive it, just laugh and give it back to me. But if I'm not there, please, Linda, take what's stored in this locker and flee to your Uncle Richard's place immediately.
Susan, my sister-in-law who was reading it with me, and I exchanged glances. And then we immediately grabbed the essentials and ran to Richard's house, my husband's uncle. To protect ourselves and our children, and to let both our parents know what they had done. My name is Linda, 34 years old. I'd like to say I'm just an ordinary housewife, but that was only true until a week ago. Now, I'm a widow with 2 children. James took his own life. That's the most likely possibility, I was told. His car had fallen off a cliff. And a suicide note was found in the dashboard. I can't believe it, I won't believe it. Because it's true. There's no reason for James to take his own life. By himself. Rather. James and I met at our workplace. A real estate resort hotel, the place I had always wanted to work. As a child, I was captivated by a large, beautiful hotel I visited at the invitation of my parents' acquaintance. I chose a university that would teach me important things for the tourism industry, and even my part-time jobs during my student years were behind the scenes at nearby hotels. And finally, I got a job at the resort hotel I had always dreamed of. It was a place known for its strict employee training, and I almost gave up early on. The reason I was able to keep going was thanks to a colleague at that time. People quit one after another, unable to withstand it, but someone was watching over me, the one who remained. That person was James, who later became my husband. We dated for 2 years before getting married. But I was surprised by a fact I learned at that time. James was the nephew of the chairman of this real estate group. He was supposed to become a part of the group's upper echelon eventually, but at that time, he was still working as a resort hotel employee. After our marriage, James moved from the hotel to the real estate side and started showing his face at his uncle's, the chairman's, office. Originally, this group was just a local real estate business, but it grew significantly after the war. The current chairman is the second since the group was formed, and it's said that Richard's skills played a major role in its growth. During the good times, he convinced his parents, so they suffered less when the economy turned bad. Then they started developing resorts, and that too was steadily advanced. But things started getting fishy around Richard when he fell ill last year. And that was because Richard had no direct heir. That's when Richard appointed James as his successor. And that decision shortened James's life. I couldn't quite come to terms with the news from the police that James had died. In the midst of that, my in-laws kept calling. Linda, what happened to James was something terrible. Something terrible? Is that how these people summarize their own son's situation?
Hey, Linda, it's going to be tough on your own, right? Come and live at our house. That's right. With James gone, you're going to have financial difficulties, right?
William and Jessica, my father-in-law and mother-in-law, took turns speaking such words to me. Feeling irritated, I responded, I can't think about the future right now. And with that, I hung up the phone. What now? I thought. After all, I had only met these in-laws twice. First time, to announce our marriage, and the second time was our wedding day. They never even showed their faces when our son and daughter were born. Yes, James had always avoided his parents, my in-laws. He had harbored distrust towards them since our marriage, saying to me,
Those people are scum who never even try to work for themselves.
James's parents currently hold certain posts within the Smith Real Estate Group.
But that's just to keep them from doing anything.
James had explained to me. He said they were completely different from the capable Richard, and everything they did turned out to be a detriment to the group.
So they're given nominal positions just to keep them from messing up. Just going on inspections, which are basically just vacations, he said.
Didn't they take you on those trips, letting you see various places? James scoffed at the thought. Me and Susan were always left behind in our big house. James had a sister named Susan. Susan married a man with no connections to the group and lived in the city where he worked. Robert, Susan's husband and James's brother-in-law, got along strangely well with James. He would go out of his way to visit James when he was nearby for work. Susan would be like,
I'm jealous of James.
Seeing how close they were. Yes, the two siblings got along well. And both had a strained relationship with their parents.
But I'm fine with it. Once I got married and moved away, I didn't care about them anymore.
Susan said nonchalantly. But James is involved with the group.
And that means?
Our parents know they're the failures of the group, so they hate seeing James do well.
Is that how it is? At our house, yes. But your parents are different, right? Not at all.
Yes. My relationship with my parents was not good either. No, it was fine when I was a child. As their only daughter, I thought they loved me. But their true nature emerged when I was in college. Quit college and come back home. That was the sudden message I received. It was for a marriage proposal. They wanted to make me, a 20-year-old at the most, come back home for that reason. Apparently, Thomas, the son of a well-known local figure, had taken a liking to me when he returned home.
I insist on having her as my wife.
To fulfill Thomas's spoiled wish, my parents were willing to do it for their own benefit.
We've raised you so far, so you should show filial piety towards us, right?
I felt my image of my parents shatter. They had raised me, their daughter, just for the sake of a return. Realizing this, I firmly refused to return home. Then, they stopped sending me money for education and living expenses. They thought that would make me come back. But I stubbornly refused to return. I consulted with my professor and found a way to continue my studies without being taken back by my parents. It was a struggle until I graduated. I managed to cover my educational expenses through scholarships. The problem was living expenses. I moved out of my secure one-room apartment, sold unused furniture, and moved into an older apartment. My life revolved around university, part-time jobs, and job hunting. I only went back to my room to sleep. As a result, this part-time job experience led to employment and meeting James. And my parents were oddly happy about my marriage to James.
Aren't they good parents?
Comparing them to his own, James said with a wry smile.
No. They did their research. They found out that you are the nephew of the chairman of the real estate group.
You're kidding. James couldn't believe it for a while. But when my parents visited for the births of our son Daniel and our daughter Mary, James also realized they were not so different from his own parents. After all, my parents said,
now that you have 2 kids, your future is secure. Yes, it'll make our lives easier too.
James's smile twisted slightly at that moment. Both James and I were sensitive to the words of parents. Especially James, who knew about my struggles during college. Were they a bit too relaxed, or did they just take it for granted? Either way, their words were clearly meant to mooch off of us and our kids in the future. After that, James started to be wary of them too. Distant in-laws, parents trying too hard to make contact. While being cautious of both, I continued raising our children. Fortunately, with James' current position and salary, we could afford a housekeeper and a sitter. We don't have trustworthy relatives, but we've managed on our own. But last year, things changed. Richard fell ill. Richard, in his 60s, who always kept fit and seemed immune to sickness, suddenly faced a health crisis. He was in good shape, with no blood pressure issues that I knew of. But an impact he suffered on his head when he was young had now formed a hematoma, pressing on his brain. Emergency surgery saved him, and he was on a good path to recovery with no lasting effects. However, this incident shook the group as Richard hadn't named a successor. Richard himself thought, I can still keep going. That's probably why he hadn't decided yet. But illness strikes unexpectedly. Once you know that, you have to think about a successor. And here's where the problem arose, the choice of who it would be. Richard and his wife had no children. No biological or adopted child was there at that time. So, Richard, while recuperating, nominated James. It seemed a reasonable choice within the group. Most senior employees knew that James was being trained and educated within the group. But some just couldn't accept it. The in-laws.
Wait a minute, Richard. Isn't he still too young? Aren't I the closest one to you, Richard? Why are you overlooking William for James?
They apparently confronted Richard while he was recuperating. Richard retorted sharply.
If I leave it to William and the others, the group will be ruined.
And he explained clearly why he chose James. But then, their focus shifted to James.
Step down, say you're too young and want your parents to take over.
Those were their words. It was a threat, clear and simple. Initially, it was, please. But gradually it turned into,
do something about it, or else.
Their tone changed.
This is bad.
What do you mean?
They might harm me, you, and our kids if we let them be. Really?
I initially wondered if they would go that far.
They would.
James said.
I never thought of them as my parents. And they probably don't think of us siblings as their children. No, that's not right. They only see children as tools to generate profit. I feel the same about my side.
No. James shook his head.
Their level of scum is worse. Your parents are just hanging on for profit, but mine, they'll try to take everything. Then what should we do?
His use of the word take startled me. We had finally found a family filled with love and trust. I didn't want anyone to be hurt.
I have an idea. I'll make sure the condo's security is tight against intruders. So Linda, please protect the kids when you're outside of the house. I'm not sure if I can handle it alone. I'll ask a security company through Richard. They'll discreetly guard you when you're out. Understood.
I responded. Since then, I've chosen popular places for outings with the kids. I also actively participated in gatherings with mom friends. It's harder for them to harm us when we're in a group. But still, there was a time when someone tried to kidnap one of the kids. It first happened at the park while playing with the other kids. I thought I would just be chatting with mom friends while we watched our kids play. But then, a plump middle-aged woman, who seemed to be just strolling, suddenly picked up Mary and started running. Luckily, the security guard, who was watching over us discreetly, quickly intervened. But the woman who tried to kidnap Mary ran away with surprising agility. In the end, we never found out why or who was behind it.
People, be careful, it's a scary world out there.
Everyone would just say. We agreed on a common understanding to be wary of both money motives and pranks. But I had forgotten one thing to be wary of. Hey there. I ran into my parents in the condo's parking lot. It was right after shopping with the kids, as we were getting out of the car. I quickly turned back into the car and locked it. Blatantly, my parents started banging on the car windows.
Mom, why are Grandpa and Grandma doing this? I'm scared.
I cracked the window just enough to speak through it. I really didn't want to open it, but we couldn't talk with it closed.
What do you want? Ah, you finally opened it. Listen, Linda, could you please talk to James? What? You know, isn't it a bit off that young James is becoming the next chairman? Shouldn't it be William's turn?
A chill ran down my spine. Could it be that these people?
Dad, did someone ask you to do this?
What?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Dad pretended not to know what I was talking about. And Mom said,
You're always so stubborn. Just go and convince your husband, James. Say the chairman should be William because it's better for the company and step down. Or else.
In Mom's hand was something like a crowbar. Then she swung it high and crash, the window shattered. The kids screamed. Mom reached her hand through the broken window.
Get down!
I yelled to the kids and frantically honked the horn, signaling to the security guard who must have been nearby. Thankfully, several men soon came running. Tisk! My parents clicked their tongues and quickly left the scene, escaping in a nearby car.
Are you okay?
The security guards asked us.
I'm fine, but the kids.
I'm okay.
Daniel responded loudly. But it was true that shards of glass had fallen on both of them.
I'll head back to our room now. Can you escort us to the entrance, please?
The guards agreed and escorted us. The manager was surprised at our situation and promised to thoroughly guard against outsiders. That night, I told James everything.
My own parents, of all people. Ah, they must have been convinced. Offering a good position if they become chairman or something.
It was likely. Very likely. Why did both our parents have to be such people?
This is seriously bad. I'll go to Richard and ask him to look after you and the kids for a while. To Richard? Yes, but we have to make sure we're not noticed. Also, I'll contact Susan. I want her to stay with you and the kids for a bit. But won't that be a burden on Susan? Considering who we're dealing with, it's necessary. They might think the same thing could happen to Susan since she's of the same bloodline. We're better off making a united front.
With that, James immediately contacted Susan.
Unbelievable. Those people. All right, James, I'll join you. What about Robert? Robert's got work, right? Well, yeah, but okay, I'll talk to him.
Thanks. It's good to have siblings at times like this, I thought to myself. And the next day, Susan came over promptly.
I told Robert about the situation, and he said he's got something to look into and will join us later. Really?
Robert's reliable.
Well, he is the man I chose.
We laughed together. But the day after that conversation, the call from the police came.
We've found James Smith's car at the bottom of a cliff.
I couldn't grasp the meaning of the words immediately.
What does that mean? He was brought into the hospital earlier.
I couldn't quite process the rest of the words.
Mrs. Smith, are you listening?
I heard the voice from the other end, but I couldn't move right away. Shocked, Susan took over the call. After that, it felt like I was just being dragged around by Susan everywhere. We went to the police, confirmed things, and were handed an envelope found on the dashboard.
A will.
When opened, there was a printed letter inside. The content was,
I can't bear the burden of being nominated as chairman, I'm sorry.
That's what it said.
So, has the police concluded that James took his own life? No, there's still an autopsy and other procedures, so the final conclusion will come later. We're just showing you this because it was found.
There's no way he'd do this to himself.
I was shouting loudly.
James, who always told us to be careful.
I couldn't find any more words after that. The police said,
We'll contact you when it's time to return James's body.
And sent us home. I can't clearly remember what happened for a while after that. The local news on TV was saying,
it's not yet clear whether it was an accident.
Having said that, they also said,
a suicide note was found, and there's a strong belief that he took his own life.
That was how it was reported on the news. I was so angry, I turned off the TV, and the kids looked at me anxiously.
Is Daddy coming back?
Daniel is 8, Mary just 5. Both of them had been taken out of school and kindergarten for a while. I was truly grateful Susan was there. My mind felt like it was covered with a thin film at that time, everything felt unreal. However, a week after the car was found, an envelope arrived with a specific delivery date.
Linda, take a look at this.
Susan handed it to me, who was in a daze. I glanced at the sender's name and my eyes widened. James? In a rush, I took the envelope and opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter. And a key.
Read this without our parents finding out.
Of course, I knew that. But he probably wanted to write it that way.
This is something I wrote in advance in case something happened. If I'm there when you receive it, just give it back to me. But if I'm not, please, Linda, take what's stored in this locker and run to Richard's place immediately.
Susan and I, reading it together, looked at each other. Then hurriedly, taking only the bare minimum, we took the kids and all got into Susan's car. My car had been under repair since that time. I didn't feel confident driving a rental car to Richard's in the next state. So, I relied on Susan.
Leave it to me, just wear a hat and a mask,
Susan said with a smile. And then we drove non-stop. We were anxious until we reached Richard's house in the next state. I assumed security guards were nearby. But after what happened to James, I was worried something might happen to the car. While on the road, I contacted Richard's house.
We're on our way.
We parked inside the property and hurried towards the main house. Richard and his wife Nancy were already there to greet us.
We're glad you're here, Linda, Susan. James asked us to guard you guys, and said he'd send you guys here eventually. But to think it would come to this. Thank you for having us. I'm sorry.
This was the only place we could turn to. I apologized deeply. The kids were looking around the grand entrance in amazement.
Don't worry. I didn't expect it to come to this. I underestimated them. I never thought they'd actually target James himself, those bastards.
Richard clenched his fist in frustration. We were led into a large, cozy living room. The room had a calm and warm atmosphere. Nancy instructed the housekeeper, then brought the kids to a corner of the room with some snacks.
Thank you so much. It's all right. You want to keep the kids in sight right now, don't you?
Yes, I didn't want to take my eyes off of them even for a moment. But the conversation we were about to have was not something I wanted the children to hear directly.
William has always been rotten, but we lacked a decisive move to exclude him from the group. Letting him float around led to this mess.
It's not your fault, Richard. My parents were involved in this too. James and I both had terrible parents. If only we had adopted James into our family earlier. Nancy muttered. Then Richard looked up.
That's right, that's a good idea. Call the lawyer. Richard, I don't want those kids to end up like James.
Richard said this and made me a proposal. Eventually, James's body, after the autopsy, was brought to Richard's house for a private funeral and a memorial service within the group. I attended with the kids, as the representative of the bereaved family. Behind us, my parents sat shamelessly as James's in-laws. Colleagues from the company, all puzzled and saddened by James's sudden loss, were in attendance. He was truly an excellent employee. We were looking forward to his future in the group.
Thank you. James would be honored to hear that.
I mechanically repeated these greetings. Friends who joined the company at the same time as James were. How could this happen? Crying over the sudden loss. Everyone who had personal ties with James was genuinely good. But their parents. After the memorial service, Richard gathered the family, my parents, and the executives at his house. The large garden and halls of Richard's house were crowded with people. Then, someone came running in.
Robert!
He must have just arrived. Robert came running in, clutching a bag.
Sorry I'm late, Susan, Linda. There were a lot of complications on my end. But it's good that the memorial service and the meeting were scheduled for today. It worked out.
Robert had a sly smile.
I'll return this to you.
Robert took out a set of documents and a USB drive from his bag.
Is it all settled?
It was from the locker indicated by the key we received earlier. After leaving in Susan's car, we met up with Robert, who made copies of the documents and the drive.
You've given the copies to our lawyer, right?
Yes.
That's good. We really needed the originals here.
I nodded vigorously. At the meeting that started, Richard spoke in front of everyone about the incident, expressing his regrets over losing James, the successor. Then, when he paused, Richard continued. It's a real shame. And I think there's one thing I was wrong about. Richard called me and my two kids forward. The kids, understandably, looked frightened and almost tearful amidst the row of adults. I told them,
it's okay,
and supported them from behind. Here, I want to appoint the next successors. My new children, Daniel and Mary. They are James's children, but I have adopted them.
The children?
The crowd murmured. Many might be surprised. But I believe this tragedy occurred because I left James as just a nephew. Right? At Richard's words, all eyes turned to my in-laws. Richard, what are you saying?
Should I say it here?
Yes, go ahead.
James took his own life, right? A suicide note was found. Probably couldn't handle the expectations. Really? You still have more to say?
Yes.
And these children as Richard's adoptees? Putting unnecessary pressure on them again? Well, they are William's grandchildren, so maybe they won't feel that much pressure. Ugh.
William's face twisted.
Actually, James didn't take his own life,
Richard declared firmly. The crowd stirred.
What are you saying? The note was found in the dashboard. No media outlet reported that it was found in the dashboard.
That's when Robert spoke up.
May I?
He asked Richard for permission to speak.
Please, go ahead.
Meanwhile, William was visibly struggling.
But if it was found in the car, then… That's just it. We haven't leaked anything to the media. Or perhaps, William, you weren't really interested in my affairs.
Saying this, Robert pulled out a police badge from his suit pocket. Yes, Robert was a detective in the state police where we lived.
Ugh.
William choked on his words. Did he really not realize? I was genuinely astonished. Indeed, Susan had said, "We haven't been in touch since he got the job." So I have heard about it before. Even when they got married, they only reported so. But shouldn't one at least be aware of the other's profession? That's just the kind of person he is. Susan's whisper was quietly heard.
I could only provide crucial evidence for the investigation, being an insider.
Then Robert explained. The police had been thoroughly investigating the car retrieved from the cliff since the beginning. They soon realized that the brakes had been tampered with, which happened to be on the day James sent a letter through a scheduled delivery.
That day, James first went to place something in a locker at the station. Then, he went to a post office inside the station to send a letter to Linda. It took him some time. It was then that someone tampered with the brake fluid system.
But that alone wasn't enough to cause immediate trouble.
After that, James drove towards Richard's house. But on the way to here, there are several winding roads, right?
Whispers began among the people around. Indeed. Many voices agreed.
That's where a road rage incident happened, intentionally. And this road isn't always wide.
Indeed, a local quirk is that despite being a frequently used road, it's surprisingly narrow in places.
In such a situation, forced to precisely apply the brakes due to a road rage, I'm sure James soon realized the brakes were failing, but it was too late.
So, that's what happened? Richard asked gravely. His words were vague, but the meaning was clear to all.
Yes. And the police have identified the road rage driver from James's dashcam and have already apprehended him,
Robert said, smiling wryly at my in-laws.
But what does that have to do with us? The road rage participant was just a hired hand. The direct employer is still unknown. However, William, you and your wife are facing separate charges. Separate charges? Yes. For the embezzlement you've been committing for years. James had been secretly investigating this matter. This is the evidence.
Suddenly, multiple projectors operated from somewhere lit up every wall with various documents.
We will now arrest you for this embezzlement.
Then, the back door opened, and police officers entered.
And one more thing.
Robert glanced at me, then turned to another direction.
You there. What, us?
My parents hesitated.
You're being arrested for damaging Linda's car. But that's just a family matter.
Mom protested. I turned to her, asking sharply.
A parent who breaks a car window with a bar? Indifferent to glass falling on their grandchildren's heads?
I glared with all my might and said,
You're not parents.
My parents slumped back in their seats. Afterward, my in-laws, arrested for embezzlement, confessed to planning James's death during questioning, adding to their charges. My parents were also charged with aiding in their plan, in addition to property damage. The case was first leaked to local media, then reported by regional newspapers and local news. But it didn't end there. Given the sensational nature of the crime and the involvement of biological parents, it became fodder for national news and tabloid TV. And in this day and age, that was not enough. This was the digital age, they were branded indelibly. Even if they were released, what could they possibly do? But that's not my concern anymore. Since then, we've been living at Richard's house. His wife adores our two new children. Nancy, who always wanted but couldn't have children, is perhaps overindulging them a bit. But for now, that's okay. The kids, having just lost their dad, had to switch schools. I feel guilty for involving them in adult conflicts. But I believe this is the safest option. As for Richard, I must stay healthy at least until the kids are grown. He's diligently working on his fitness. Everyone, tea is ready. I spend my days in this house taking care of the kids and keeping these two company. I'm not sure how much I can contribute to them, but for the kids' sake, I'll keep doing my best.